Hello YouTube and welcome to yet another video. Today I'm doing a gear review. I'm reviewing the new DJI Osmo Action 3. As some of you might be aware, I've been using the DJI Osmo Action 1 since about 2020. It's been my go-to action camera that I use on my races and rides for the videos that I post here on YouTube. There's a few reasons for that. Number one is probably price compared to GoPro and the other competitors. Number two, the fact that I really like the brand. DJI is awesome and I've always loved their drones. And then number three is that it had the specs that I needed. There was one small thing missing from the specs of the DJI Osmo 1, and that is why I've been looking into upgrading to the Osmo 2. And now since the Osmo 3 came out, it seemed like the perfect time to do so because of course it has what I need. What did I need? I'm not going to go through all the specs that this camera has because one, you can see it on their website, and two, there's so many more reviews that go through that. I wanted to focus this review on cycling specific and what I look for when I use a camera like this or I'm looking to buy something like this. So for the things that I do, cycling, road cycling, off-road cycling, just being on the bike, having this attached to the bike or yourself, I look for stability inside the body of the camera itself, so no external gimbals preferably. I look for high quality, so 4K, and sometimes slow-mo. The last thing that I look for in a camera like this is the angle of the lens. So I prefer having a wider angle look on my shots, and this specific camera is a huge game changer for that. So in this video, I'm gonna break down the pros and cons of this DJI Osmo Action 3, and I'm gonna share a few thoughts on why I bought this camera and why I didn't buy the competition. So I'll just start with the cons because there's not a lot, but there are some that need to be kept in mind. This camera is heavier than the predecessors, both of them. It is bigger, again, than both of them. And those are two huge factors when thinking about weight and cycling. Putting that aside, there's really nothing else, quote unquote, bad that I have to say about this camera. So I'll jump into the pros. Number one pro for me is going to be the fact that they introduced ultra wide on this camera, which means that the angle of the lens is smaller, therefore the shot is wider, and that means that you can get more things in shot when out riding. So that's a huge factor for me, something that I've been looking for in a camera like this. The DJI Osmo Action 1 and 2 also had a pretty wide angle, but when you turned on Rocksteady, which is DJI's internal stabilizing system, the angle would narrow down and you wouldn't be able to use that wider angle that they had anymore. Now you can. Now the angle is even wider and you can have Rocksteady on while on that wide angle. Also, the new DJI Osmo Action 3 as a new Rocksteady. They're calling it Rocksteady 3.0, and I can tell you it is amazing. It also has some new features like Horizon Lock that I personally don't use and don't really like, and that does crop in your image to a less wide angle. Many other things, but the main factor for me buying this camera is the ultra wide lens being able to mix with the new Rocksteady. Something else that's really important for me in a camera like this is the 4K 24 FPS setting that most cameras these days have, so I wasn't really worried about getting that in a camera. It also goes up to like 120 frames per second, which is really slow motion at that same high quality. I probably won't use that, but it does have it. The last two pros that I'm gonna mention about this camera, are one, the fact that the mount is magnetic, so it mounts magnetically on the bottom, and if you put the case on, you can mount it vertically as well, which is super awesome. People have mixed things to say about it online, but I personally am a big fan of that versus having to screw in and screw out every time you want to take the camera from the mount. And lastly, a huge thing for me on this camera, which its predecessor and the competition also has, but I wanted to make sure that it worked as well, if not better in this camera, is what I'm calling the click and go setting. So basically, your camera's off, you press on, and it starts recording. Why is this important to me? Because I'll put this on my bike. I'm at the start line. I don't want to have to look at the screen or take the camera from the bike and prepare everything. I just want to click once, not have to click to turn it on and then start recording, just once to turn it on and start recording at once and go about my race. This camera is extra fast at that. And I thought I'd share with you guys how long it takes to go from the click to actually recording. So I'll put this closer and we can do a little timeline as you see here. And here we go. There it is, recording. As you saw, that was pretty fast. Those are my pros and cons of the camera. So I've shared why I've upgraded from the DJI Osmo Action 1. The reason why I've decided to skip the Osmo Action 2 is because of the low battery life of that camera. It is an awesome camera, especially because of its size and weight, but sometimes I do go race for longer than an hour with the camera on, so it is important for me that the camera would just stay on and record the whole thing. Before I share with you guys my go-to settings on this camera, I just wanted to mention why I went for the DJI and not the GoPro or other competitor. It's a simple reason, and that is the fact that this camera is almost $200 cheaper than the GoPro competitor. The GoPro doesn't really have anything that this camera doesn't have. This one doesn't really have anything that the GoPro doesn't have. The colors, stabilization, noise, and that kind of varies between the both, but they do the same things. So that said, I've shared the pros and cons of this camera. I've shared why I got it and not something else, and why I upgraded from what I had before. Right now I'm using still my DJI Osmo Action 1 on the bike, probably on the rear, while I use this one on the front. And I'll keep my GoPro Hero Session, which I really like for lightweight and just small applications. So before I go, I'm just going to show you what my go-to settings are on this camera. So I just turned the camera on. If you swipe up, you get the resolution menu. My go-to is always the 4K 16:9, 24 frames per second, always making sure that the Rocksteady is turned on. Here on the right, we have some more settings. I personally click here on the Pro menu on the top right, which opens these extra two settings. I make sure that the field of view is extra wide. Then the white balance, I keep it on auto. Color, I go for the D-Cinelike, which makes it a little flatter and easier to edit afterwards. If you keep it with the normal, it also looks really good. I've used this before, and in the example footage that I'm showing throughout this video, it was like that. And finally, on the exposure, I make sure that I'm at 1/50th. So I'll also go through the menu just to show you guys that it looks a little different from the previous cameras, but it's still very straightforward and easy to use. Here you can create profiles. I have created my profile, which is the one I just mentioned. It has all the settings that I prefer listed there at the bottom. Quick selection, I don't really use that. The brightness of the screen, I love it bright. Settings of the camera, there's a few new things here. Nothing that I personally change. And then this bottom row is pretty much locking and unlocking screens, voice activation, that kind of stuff. So those are my settings. That's what the camera goes to when I press the record button. Thank you so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and all that good stuff. Let me know if you have any questions, and maybe I'll do a follow-up video once I've used this camera for a while. Thanks again. See you on the next one.